They owned the Patriots on opening week. They came from 21 down in the fourth to beat the Ravens in Baltimore. And they dethroned the Super Bowl favorites Buffalo Bills off the top spot in the AFC EAST. But we still have to ask the all-important question: are the Miami Dolphins for real? To get a more complete answer, we have to remind ourselves briefly of the Dolphins franchise history. In their 57-season existence in the NFL, the Miami Dolphins have been to the playoffs on 23 occasions. So if you're a Dolphins fan in your 60s, you would have seen this team compete in the playoffs 40% of the time. You would have also witnessed them reach the Super Bowl 5 times, from 1971 to 1973, and 1982 and 1984. The team only managed to win 2 of those, back in 1972 and 73. And it was in 1972 when the Dolphins were undefeated. It was the perfect season, and they're the only team in the entire history of the NFL to accomplish it. The New England Patriots came close, but were beaten by the Giants in the 2007 season. So this shows you the winning mentality and fighting spirit of those Dolphins teams back then in the 20th century. But fast forward to the 21st century, and the Dolphins have had only 4 playoff appearances. No Super Bowl runs, and just 1 victory in those 4 combined playoff visits. 1 playoff win in 22 years, and that happened in the year 2000 when they finished with a regular season record of 11-5 and beat the Indianapolis Colts 23-17 in overtime in Miami. The Dolphins went on to be battered by the Oakland Raiders in the divisional game 27-0. A blowout shutout that must have bruised the players' egos, but the team bounced back the following year and again finished with 11 wins in the regular season. They made the playoffs only to be clobbered by the Baltimore Ravens 20-3 on their home turf. Such a devastating loss on their own field left the franchise hurting and demoralized. The Dolphins wouldn't return to the playoffs until 7 years later in 2008, when they again had a regular season record of 11-5, and again lost to the Baltimore Ravens, and again at home, this time with the score of 27-9. Their last playoff appearance came in 2016 and had won 10 games, which were enough to meet the Steelers in Pittsburgh for the right to be in the divisional round. The Dolphins lost big, 30 points to 12, and have not felt the sweet sensation of playoff football since. In that 2016, their 4th game in the regular season was on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals, which they lost 22-7 on a Thursday night. Fast forward to 2022, where the Dolphins traveled to Cincinnati in Week 4, hoping to go 4-0 on the season and hand the defending AFC champions another loss. After a blistering start from both teams, the game was incredibly close. Only 2 points separated both teams at halftime, but the momentum shifted just before the half when Tua Tagovailoa was carted off after sustaining head and neck injuries. The star quarterback for the Dolphins would not return to the game. It was a scary sight for all who witnessed it. Miami would go on to lose the game by 12 points, but Tua was discharged from the hospital and able to travel back with the team. There's room for optimism after that defeat to the Bengals. Firstly, it seems their quarterback will return to action this season. Secondly, the Dolphins are 3-1 with legitimate hopes of making the playoffs under the guidance of their first-year coach, Mike McDaniel. The head coach for the Dolphins is a former longtime assistant to Mike and Kyle Shanahan, so he has the experience and some pedigree. He also managed to implement a surefire system in the event that Tua would miss some game time in the shape of Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater is a quarterback that can manage a game quite well given his experience of being in the league. After spending his first 4 seasons with the Vikings, Bridgewater became somewhat of a journeyman, ending up with the Jets for a season, the Saints for 2, and last season was the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Here are some stats on Bridgewater. He has a career pass completion percentage of 66.4, 72 touchdowns, and 44 interceptions. Now, those are exactly the type of numbers you want from a starting quarterback in this league, let alone someone who's acting as a backup. It needs to be highlighted that losing Tua for a few games isn't the end of all Dolphins' hopes of reaching the playoffs, especially when they have the 2 fastest wide receivers in the NFL in Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. Hill was recently traded to Miami from the Kansas City Chiefs, where he established himself as an undisputed #1 elite receiver. Not only is Hill a speedster, but he has the mental acumen to create separation even when opposing defenses are double-teaming him. Against the Bengals, he pulled off an incredible catch while the ball was bobbling between him and a defender. This is what Tyreek Hill has done so far this season. He has caught the ball 31 times from 43 targets for 477 yards. That's just in 4 games, so he's averaging over 100 yards receiving per game, plus he has 2 touchdowns to add to his stellar stats. The addition of Tyreek Hill not only will create exciting plays down the field, but will also open up and release the other speedster on the team, Jaylen Waddle. Waddle is in his sophomore season after impressing in his rookie year, where he played in 16 games and had 104 receptions for 1,015 yards, scoring 6 touchdowns in the process. Now this year, Waddle featured in all 4 games, scoring 3 touchdowns and having 381 yards from 21 receptions. And I know what people might be thinking, they achieved this with Tua, but let's trust head coach Mike McDaniel. He planned for this unfortunate occurrence and further reinforced the ironclad playoff-seeking strategy by building a defense that can win a championship. The defensive coordinator, Josh Boyer, is in charge of a brutal and vicious crew that loves to get to the quarterback and especially loves to strip the ball. The defense has 4 forced fumbles from 4 games, 1 interception, and more importantly, 7 sacks. The sack leaders are linebacker Melvin Ingram and safety Jevon Holland. This suggests that this team wants to blitz as often as possible and trust their cornerbacks to clamp down on the wide receivers. And this Dolphins defense is also a pretty good individual tackling team, as they have 172 tackles on the season. That's 43 solo tackles per game. But they also defend as a unit and gang tackle whenever they can, which has resulted in 98 assisted tackles. All of this to say that this defensive group can be trusted to be solid and come up with a big play when needed. That's all any coach can ask for from his defense. It's a unit that knows they have to step up after the recent injury to their star quarterback. They have to bear the burden until Tua can return and launch those deep balls to Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. There is one glaring aspect, though, that has not been mentioned, and that's the run game, or the seemingly ineffectual run game. In 4 games, the Dolphins have only rushed for 277 yards from 80 attempts, which is 3.4 yards per carry. That's pathetic. It's so bad that the running backs are being used as extra wide receivers when down at the goal line, as was the case against the Bengals when Chase Edmonds scored. The run game is such an inconsequential facet to their offensive strategy that it now has to be a focal point to chew time off the clock and manage the tempo of the game due to the recent injury sustained by Tua. The irony cannot be escaped that the team with the 2 fastest wide receivers have to lean on the run game. Have we come close to answering if the Dolphins are for real? Miami has a clever coach in Mike McDaniel who will know how to adapt to a difficult situation. They have a veteran quarterback who can throw the deep ball if need be. They got fast and talented wide receivers and a defense that understands that they are the key to achieving success. Tua isn't done this season, and as long as there is a chance that he will be back on the field, the Dolphins with a 3-1 record are most definitely for real. So what are your thoughts on the Dolphins season? Are they done? Will they make it to the playoffs? The Super Bowl? Please let us know in the comments below, but before you go and you still want to watch some awesome NFL content like this, please watch the next video that will pop on your screen.